They tell you the ocean is quiet because it has nowhere to echo. That's a lie. The ocean echoes everything, and sometimes it answers back. I was a sonar tech on a fast attack boat. We were in transit, doing a patrol nobody would ever read about in the papers. That's when the orders started. Short, clean, and signed by no one. I joined the boat at 28. The steel becomes your weather. The sea becomes your calendar. You learn the rhythms, 6 on, 6 off, drills at odd hours, the small kindnesses that keep 70 souls from snapping, sonar room lights that never fully go dark, the smell of coolant and coffee, the sweetness of sleep when it comes. My job was simple on paper. Listen, classify, log. Sonar is mostly listening. Passive sonar hears others. Active sonar sings and waits for an echo, but it also tells the whole ocean you're there. You pick the quiet words, the ones that let you live. We had rules, formal and superstition. The formal ones were in the book. Don't transmit without orders, authenticate every command, maintain radio silence unless the schedule calls for a burst. Submarines don't get casual orders at the keel. Most messages come in scheduled bursts and are authenticated through known channels. A sub at depth will normally surface or come shallow for a longer connection if it needs sustained communications. But there's always an informal rule sailors repeat like a prayer. Trust the watch, but verify with your hands. When the sea goes weird, men go quieter. It was 0208. The room hummed green. I had coffee cold in a mug and a headache of static. The console flagged a new message. No header, no source, only a concise line and a signature that was blank. Order: reduce speed to 4 knots and maintain silent depth at 280 meters. Execute hydropump check on port manifold 2 at 0300. Final. I looked at the XO like I'd swallowed a live thing. No source, no authentication, no EAM, no fleet prefix. No one in the net had this packet. The timestamp read 12 minutes in our future. We had procedures for unidentified traffic. Log it, isolate it, authenticate through the normal chain, and do not execute until verified. That's not paranoia, it's survival. Command messages are authenticated because the consequences of a bad order can be catastrophic. We called naval security if something smelled off. But something in the room bent. The captain tapped the console, read the line once, then said, "Do the hydropump check." Quietly. His tone was not question, it was business. We obeyed. At 0300, port manifold 2 coughed a seal leak so tiny we would have missed it on a casual pass. It would have sheared in a day of high-speed transit. We found shards of a composite sleeve embedded in the pump housing, a manufacturing fluke. If the captain had waited for authentication, the shaft would have failed. People would have been hurt. The unread signature stayed blank. The message disappeared from the internal net, like a thing with no shadow. Then the second order came. Then the third. Each one short, precise, and time-stamped in the near future, faster than our normal message latency. Never any route, never any author, always specific. A valve here, a bearing swat there. Rotate watch 2 man down at 1100. Patch seam A9 by 2200. The orders were surgical. The orders were right. We tried to pin them down as a network anomaly. We thought maybe Hermes, our predictive maintenance suite, had learned to write like a petty officer. It didn't. Hermes needed authenticated input. It wasn't hooked to that feed. We checked logs. The packets traced to internal queues that had no process owner. I began saving every printout. I put each one into a manila folder in my locker. At night, I would read them like prayer cards. Sometimes they told me about hardware that failed, And then the hardware failed on schedule. Other times they mentioned men. Keep blood pressure meds 2 hours before watch change for Petty Officer Lane. Lane had never told anyone he took blood pressure meds. He had them in his locker. The packet was always right. It felt like someone was watching the future and feeding it back through itself. The boat got younger and older at the same time. Younger because we avoided the stupid accidents. Older because we had to live under the knowledge that someone already knew what would go wrong. We made rules of our own. Rule 1. Print orders with future timestamps. Put copies in your locker. Rule 2. Fix the thing if the order is safe and plausible. Rule 3. If an order asks you to violate nuclear verify or launch off, you refuse. Why the third rule? Because some orders would have put us on a hair trigger. The two-person rule for launch authority exists for a reason, to prevent a single person from wrecking everything. On nuclear systems and other nuclear systems, multiple officers must authenticate launch orders. No one man can do it alone. The two-person safeguard is built into nukes because the cost of a mistake is global. The orders we were getting never once dealt with launch auth. They were petty and domestic. Pump seals, bilge tile, rotate watch, but the effect compounded. A hole patched in time is a hole that never grows. But men don't like being told what they'll do next. That's human. Rumors started like seeped oil. Some sailors called the messages the whispers. Others said we'd broken something cosmic. A few suspected intelligence, a hack, some black ops project on predictive maintenance. A very small number began to pray. We staggered between the two instincts: follow the orders and stay alive, or resist and reclaim free will. One order arrived in the purple hours that read, "Order at 400, ascend to 60 meters and surface at periscope depth for a routine drop-down to pick up authenticated log seals. Run full comm and broadcast international distress test. Final." There are certain words a watch will never hear without the hairs on your arms going up. Surface is one of them. Broadcast is another. Surface to run a broadcast in a foreign theater with no origin, no authority? We debated in whispers in the control room. The captain chewed the inside of his cheek. If it's a trap, the only way to find out is to go up on the surface and be open about it. If it's legitimate and we ignore it, his voice trailed into what we all knew. Ships lost, names carved into pages. We angled up. At 4:01, the periscope broke the skin. There were no ships on the horizon. At 4:02, we sent the test broadcast, a benign, routine ping that should have only been picked up by local comm buoys. At 4:05, 3 fishing boats plied the waters 10 kilometers away, oblivious. At 4:06, a cluster of pings hit our net. High speed, coordinated, like someone trying every key at once. They were not enemy hulls. They were not a simple spoof. The pings matched our own internal machine signatures, the way our own maintenance scheduler sounded on the wire. It was as if something on our boat was answering our call with a voice that wasn't ours. After we submerged again, the console flagged a new message, not a future order this time, but a single line. We answered because we were told to. That was the moment the mood changed from curious to hollow. We obeyed because we had to. We obeyed because the order saved men. We obeyed because the sea rewards pragmatism. But obedience became its own danger. Men stopped asking why and started marking the correct boxes. We fixed the pumps. We swapped bearings. We rotated the watch. We averted the small disasters. But obedience can calcify into automatism. We would follow orders that, if extended, would make us empty of decision. A petty officer I respected, Morales, stood in the mess one night and said, "If we stop listening, what do we become?"
He did not finish. The next day he was found in the aft sonar well, curled and asleep with his head against a tubing manifold. When they woke him, he had a small printed packet in his hand, time-stamped 3 hours after they found him. He'd not been on watch. He had not been near the printer. Morales left the boat 2 ports later. He did not say goodbye to anyone. He just walked off like a man who had been told the road and then chosen to walk it alone. When a rule begins to write itself, when your future is a file in a queue, men pick one of 2 paths: embrace the safety and become ghosts, or refuse and become victims. There is no third way on a hull that lists. The order that forced us to choose came on a slate-gray morning. Order: at 0900, in event of unidentified foreign contact, perform hull lighting protocol Bravo and execute electronic counter-signature. If UHF challenge is not authenticated within 5 minutes, take control of nearest civilian vessel by disabling its systems and tow to rendezvous coordinates. Final: disable civilian systems. Capture a ship. The phrasing read like a lawless handbook, a pirate script wearing a naval format. The author had no authority we recognized. The captain slammed his palm on the table, and the lights in the control room flickered with the impact. We had drill language for force protection. We had ROE, rules of engagement. We had legal counsel on how to handle captured vessels and detained crews. But nobody puts a civilian capture scenario into a standing, unauthenticated order. That's a line between military action and piracy. That's a line between nation and rogue. The captain spent an hour on the deck in the cold, then called everyone together. He read the order aloud and then said quietly, "We will not follow this order as written. If someone wants piracy, they'll have to change our law books. We will follow proper authentication, or we will not follow at all. Is that understood?" Heads nodded. But that night, someone printed the order for a second time and slipped it under the chief's pillow. Someone was writing instructions we would never agree to, then slipping them into the ship like a sedative. Someone wanted the boat to be a thing that could be ordered beyond law. We traced the packets. We hit a wall of air-gapped processes and internal queues. Every trace we chased folded inward. The signatures resolved for a moment to the boat's own file system, then to a user account that had been created the day before but assigned to no man, then to a hash that matched a printout I'd once left under my bunk. You ask men what they'd do if they could write tomorrow. Most will say something noble. A few will say selfish things. The me who wrote the last line under the bunk had been 23 and arrogant. The man who finds the folder years later has lived with the price of his choices. We locked the network. We air-gapped systems. We destroyed printers and burned drives. We told the captain to authorize a sweep. We disassembled the maintenance scheduler and found a timing demon with a clock that had been running forward instead of back. The code looked like a looping algorithm that had been fed its own outputs for months. When we pulled some of the drives from a quiet server farm, one drive was warm, not a residual warmth from operation, warm now, as if some process had just run. I put my hand against the drive and felt the heartbeat of something that was not alive in the way we are. We argued all night. One group said, "Write the final packet that severs the loop and tells whoever is listening to go away." Another said, "Keep the loop. It saved our lives." The captain looked at us like a man who'd been given a knife and asked to choose a cut. Finally, we wrote something we called closure. We scheduled the packet delivery, a formal order that said, "Archive sealed. All future scheduled maintenance messages blocked. Any unknown author account banned. If unknown packets continue, quarantine and destroy. Signed, CO. We set it to deliver, and then we waited. At 03, a packet came through. The signature resolved not to an author unknown this time, but to a name we all recognized. The petty officer who had long since left us, Morales. The message was short. We could not stop the tide. We learned who we were when someone told us the map. Be careful how you mend things that hold the dark. M. We never found Morales. We later learned he'd had a history of blackouts and an estranged brother 200 miles inland. The patches we wrote sealed some things. They opened others. We took the boat home. We told versions of the story that were sanitized. We encountered a comms anomaly. That was true. It was the truth that fit in a report and would not call enforcement to the door. But in my locker, under a folded work shirt, I still keep the manila folder. Sometimes at night, I pull it out and read the orders one more time. Sometimes I imagine the person on the other end. Not a person at all, maybe a process or a loop, maybe our future echoing back. And I ask, who was the first to write the first order from no one? Did we write it, then live into it? Did it write us? The sea keeps its own time. Sometimes I think the ocean was answering. Sometimes I think the ocean was mocking us. I know this. Orders from no one will teach you that the most dangerous command is the one that removes the need to ask why. So here's the last thing I'll say to anyone who hears this in the dark hours. If a machine ever tells you the future, print it, fix the pump, save the kid, and then, if you have the courage, burn the paper. Better to live with the ache of choice than the numbness of being told what you will do next, because once a hull gets used to moving under orders it didn't sign, it will forget how to steer.